So first of all, let's recap what we can do now with metadata import and parallelism. Since 12.2, metadata can be imported in parallel concurrently for most types of metadata objects. And you can see the ones that can and cannot go parallel in this graphic. Now, that doesn't mean that, for example, for say package bodies that we just do one package body per worker at a time. We actually take the bits of metadata and we batch them into XML documents. Depends on the type of metadata that we're talking about, but in this example, we will put 80 create user statements in a given document. So let's say you have 162 users. And in this case, what we would do is we would have multiple XML documents, each with 80 users in it. And we would dole out those XML documents to each of the parallel workers. So worker 1 gets an XML document to load of 80 users. That would be pretty quick. Worker 2 gets another XML document to load. And worker 3 would get an XML document, but it wouldn't even have a full 80 users. It might only have, in this case, 2. And in this case, if all you were doing is metadata, worker 4 might actually be idle at this point, but that's okay. In the scheme of things, this scales very well with a reasonable amount of work per unit for each worker. And actually what we would do in this case for a full import is we would know in advance that we would only need those 3 workers for metadata, and worker 4 would be working on data at this time. But sometimes there are limitations on parallelism. As highly as Datapump can scale when going parallel, there are some times where we just can't do it. For example, a network mode import over a DB link, you will get parallelism between partitions and subpartitions, but you can't get parallel query using multiple PX processes on a very large partition or an unpartitioned table. You also don't get metadata parallelism over a network import. The simple reason for that is that a network import is actually a simultaneous export from the source and import into the target. And we don't have a staging period where we gather all the information about the metadata and determine the dependencies first. We find it's more efficient over the network to just get things going into that target database. You also, and we've been saying this for well over a decade, so hopefully this is not the first time you've heard it, you will not get parallelism if you have a table with a basic file lob column. If you have not converted to secure files yet, when you export that lob table, you will get one and only one process working on it. No matter how big the partition is, we cannot use parallel query. And no matter how many partitions you have, we cannot export them in parallel. That is a fundamental restriction of basic file lobs. And that is why you need to move to secure file lobs. Happily, we make it easy for you. There's a transform where you can do this in Datapump, or if you're migrating to Autonomous Database, as Bill described, it will happen for you automatically. The last limitation, which goes up until 19C, is that transportable tablespace jobs do not get parallelism for their metadata. That's both export and import. The reason for that is that, well, transportable tablespace has an additional kind of metadata in it. So it's not just users, grants, roles, privileges, etc. It also has all the segment information about your tables. And that had never been parallel until 21C. So in 21C, we made that parallel. Hopefully you're not using 21C in production because it's an innovation release meant for more development purposes. But once you get to 23, you'll see the full benefit of that.